Hey, this is Kirk, the bariatric carnivore. Well, do you have to eat a certain number of macros every single day in order to be healthy? And frankly, the answer to that to me is no. Um, I don't think there's any hard, fast rule, but I understand where you're coming from if you really do think that that's the case. Because look, when we were little kids and we were in school and we had health class, they told us that, there's this thing that the government told us is called the RDA. And if you do not get that recommended daily allowance of certain vitamins, et cetera, you're going to get some sort of horrible disease. And that's the way we were raised. And is that true? I mean, think about it in your own life. I mean, have there been times when you have not gotten the recommended daily allowance of certain things, and did you get certain diseases? No, that's probably not true. I mean, frankly, I go sometimes days without eating deliberately because I want to engage in a thing called autophagy, which is the body cleansing itself by it starts eating weak, bad cells throughout the body, and it helps me to get reattached to my overall hunger signals to make sure that I'm only eating when I'm hungry and I know when to quit. Now, why does this become a problem? Well, there's a lot of people that want to eat 3 meals a day because marketers have sold them on this idea. And women in particular will cut portions and they will measure stuff, um, not based on their overall hunger, but because they think this is how much they need to eat. And I don't think that's true. I mean, if you really want to make sure that you're getting adequate nutrition, then you sit down when you're hungry and you eat real food like meat, beef, butter, bacon, and eggs until you are no longer hungry. When you're comfortably full, you stop. And if you do that, you're going to self regulate. I mean, frankly, look around the nature. I mean, take a look at those nature things, and you see, what's going on in the African savannah, and a lion goes and they kill something and they eat until they're full. And then they go off and sleep and enjoy themselves and do lion things until they're ready to eat again. And then they kill something else and they eat until they are done, and then they leave stuff for the scavengers. That's the way nature works. And as a result, you don't see fat lions. The problem with us is we are in a food environment where we can eat 24/7 and all sorts of delicious stuff, and it's always there. Uh, and and we will overthink how to overcome our being overweight and having dietary issues. So, when you think about the basic macronutrients, what do we need? Well, there's three basic macronutrients: carbohydrates, fats, and protein. Now, carbohydrates, how many carbohydrates do you need every day in order to maintain maximum health? The answer to that is it's a trick question. Zero. You don't need carbohydrates in order to be healthy. Your body will create the amount of glucose it needs through a process called gluconeogenesis. That there's certain cells that run off of glucose, certain ones in your kidneys, your red blood cells, etc., and those get adequate amounts of glucose through the body producing its own. The body, if it creates excess glucose, stores it in the muscle and it will use it for short bursts of energy when you need it. So you don't need to add in carbohydrates in order to be healthy. Now, how much protein do you need? And this is an interesting question because you can ask 10 nutritionists, how much protein do we need on a daily basis? And you will get about 20 different answers. The best rule of thumb that I've seen is on average about 2 grams of protein per ideal body weight. And I say ideal body weight because if you're really overweight, that's going to be way too much protein for you. But you need to get somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 grams on average per day. And I say on average because what I will do, if every now and then I will track to make sure that I'm, what am I eating, etc. And I'll use a thing called MyFitnessPal to track this type of stuff. And I don't do it on a daily basis, but I want to look at the week averages. because some days I feel hungry, some days I don't. So, if you look at it over the course of a week, I think you get a much better sense of what you're eating if you're getting enough adequate protein. And the reason why I care is because as I'm getting older, my need for protein actually goes up dramatically because my body cannot absorb protein as well as it did when I was much younger. So that's a reason to kind of occasionally pay attention to how much protein you're getting. And then there's the question of how much fat do you need? And the way protein and fat work together in nature is, generally speaking, it's usually about a 70-30 ratio. So about 30% of your meat, that you're going to get should be protein, 70% should be fat. Now, how do you know if you're getting enough fat? Well, there's a couple of ways that you can check. One of them is, what's your energy level? If you're not eating carbohydrates, your energy is going to be coming from fat. That's going to be fat on you, or it's going to be fat from the food. And if you're losing energy, probably a sign that you're just not getting enough fat. And you might, if you're eating very lean cuts of meat, you may want to start putting some butter on it, just to make sure. Dry skin, hard stools are usually a sign that you're not getting enough fat in the diet. Very loose stools usually means you're getting too much fat. So, your mileage may vary, but, that's kind of my gauge, to make sure that I'm getting enough. How do I know if I'm getting enough protein in the long term? Well, one of the big things is, are you losing hair in clumps? I mean, are you running your hair? Check your brush of your hair, and if you've got huge amounts of hair in there that is suddenly going up, that's usually a sign you're not getting enough protein. Wounds that are slow to heal, probably a sign that you're not getting enough protein. If you're not able to put muscle on anymore, well, that's usually a sign that you're not getting adequate amounts of protein. And if you have been diagnosed with osteoporosis, where they say, look, you're losing bone mass, your bone is mostly protein. So if you're losing bone mass, you're probably not getting adequate protein. And most of the time, that is because you're artificially restricting the amount that you're eating. Look, I don't measure out how much stuff I'm eating every day. I will put a big hunk of meat, I may cook up a big steak, and I will eat until I am comfortably full. And then the rest of the steak goes in the fridge until tomorrow, and it gets mixed in with my eggs. So, don't get into the habit of minimizing how much you should be eating. Put a lot of stuff on your plate, eat until you're comfortably full, and then put the rest of it in the fridge. That's the easiest way to make sure that you're getting adequate food, protein, etc. Um, check the stools. How do you feel? What's your energy level like? All these type of things all work together because they count. They're important. They're important for determining what your overall health is. So I don't track per se. I don't have to worry about looking at macros. I don't have to count them. I don't have to get everything in the right proportions. All I have to do is eat real food, at least a couple times a day, and only when I'm hungry, and quit eating when you're full. And that pretty much keeps me on track. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician. I'm an end user. I'm somebody who's just trying to stay as healthy as he possibly can. And, I read a lot on a whole host of different sources, and I listen to a lot of different lectures from people that do know what they're talking about, so that I can explain, put it to use and explain what I'm doing. I try to put out a couple messages each week. If you like this message, please hit like and subscribe. Join this channel of other like-minded folks. I will talk to you again soon.